Assalamu alaikum everybody. I wanted to make one more video before the end of Ramadan, so this is it. The theme of this video is books on homosexuality and Islam, because I have 4 good books on homosexuality and Islam that are just awesome, and it really surprised me how many books I have collected over this past year. 4 books is like a lot when you talk about homosexuality in Islam. But anyway, they're really good books. They're scholarly works, and they're awesome. First one I would recommend is Keisha Ali's Sexual Ethics and Islam. She doesn't just talk about homosexuality, it's just one chapter actually, but she also talks about marriage, divorce, slavery, what else? The child bride Aisha, radiallahu anha, marrying the Prophet, sallallahu, and it's just a really good book. She's very intellectual, but at the same time she also comes from a place of faith. So at the same time as she's very critical as a scholar with the things she studies, she also is a Muslim, and you see that in her writing, and it's good. My newest book is Before Homosexuality in the Arab Islamic World, from 1500 to 1800 CE, by Khalid al-Ruayhab, and it's a very good book about the perceptions of homosexuality, and he kind of argues that our concept of homosexuality that we have today in our modern world is different than what they had in this time period between 1500 and 1800. But it was there, and it's very interesting what he found. Another book is Islamic Homosexualities, which is great. A collection of articles by different scholars in Islam, and it's just really good. It has Rumi in it, so automatically it's awesome. Another book, this is the one I wanted to focus on in this video, is Homosexuality in Islam by Professor Scott Kugel, and he is the one who is trying to rethink the Quran, Sunnah, and Islam to become more gay, LGBT affirming. And it's a wonderful book. And he's divided up his book into different sections. Like, he talks about the Quran here, then he critiques Hadith here, he talks about fiqh. Fiqh is the interpretation of Sharia. And what else? His last chapter on transgender experience in Islam is probably his best chapter, and I love it. And anyway, I wanted to read an excerpt actually, because it's so good, and I'll leave you with that. Okay, so this comes from his chapter Liberating Quran under the heading Diversity and Sexuality. Scott Kugel writes, in the Quran's view, diversity is a positive reality in the created nature of things. Diversity and multiplicity in the cosmos and humanity and among social groups are an integral part of God's creative will. They are an indispensable challenge to our moral systems. Islamic feminists have explored the Quranic description of gender, such as in the verse, O people, stay aware of your Lord who created you all from a single self and created from it its mate and spread from those two many men and women. The creation of women was not a mistake, lessening of the moral standard, or a faulty copying of the perfect male, as suggested by later patriarchal interpretations in Islam and quoted in the Sharia. Diversity in gender is intimately related to diversity in human communities among tribes, sects, nations, and civilizations. In the Quran, O people, we created you all from a male and a female and made you into different communities and different tribes so that you should come to know one another, acknowledging that the most noble among you is the one most aware of God. There is a moral purpose behind the single God's creation of different and seemingly contradictory human types. It challenges us to restrain our egoistic aggrandizement, practice ethical compassion toward others, protect the vulnerable in their socially defined difference, and through this to stay conscious of God's presence. In the Quran, if God had willed, God would have made you one single community, but rather God brings whomsoever God wills within divine compassion. Yet the unjust oppressors have no guardian and no helper. Our human diversity is often cause for exclusion and violence, but it is actually God's way of challenging us to rise up to the demands of justice, beyond the limitation of our individual egoism and communal chauvinism. I really like that part. Somebody told me how his spiritual imperative for embracing his homosexuality was to represent God's diversity in his person. And by doing that, he is kind of like a test of people's compassion in this world. That difference is put in this world as a test of compassion from others. And it's actually very beautiful, because the compassion and love that you can possibly receive from others is moving. And also the hate and oftentimes violence, especially in the Muslim world, is very disturbing. Anyway, continuing on. Deep diversity confronts us with a bewildering pattern of differentiation. Difference often leads us to exclude others in hopes of building a firm community, or with ambition to create a hierarchy of power to assert some moral order. However, the Quran warns us against going to extremes to exclude others, reminding us that not a single life is dispensable. In the Quran, whoever kills an innocent life, it is as if he had killed all of humanity, and whoever gives life to one, it is as if he had revived all of humanity. All people, despite the apparent and real differences, are part of a greater whole. Safeguarding the dignity of each is essential to achieving one's own dignity, and upholding the rights of each is integral to securing justice for oneself. The diversity of human community is not just in appearances, but also in the subtler hues of language and shades of belief. The Quran says, "One of God's signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the diversity of your tongues and your colors, in which there are signs for those who know." The Quranic term for color, lawn, is the richness of Arabic metaphors, can refer not just to visible hues, but to other sensations like the taste of different dishes, of food, or aromas. Our diversity as human beings goes much deeper than color of the skin or surface appearances, and extends into the inner core of our personalities, where language, concepts, beliefs, and experiences lie. With such a radically positive assessment of human diversity on the epistemological and ethical levels, one can justifiably wonder whether the Quran addresses diversity in sexuality as well. What do we mean by sexuality? Deep in the core of the human personality lies our sense of sexuality, which is far more subtle and pervasive than mere sexual acts. By sexuality, we mean a kind of self-awareness that is not just an urge like lust, but rather a passion that grants us emotional fulfillment, sparks in us expansive joy, and urges us toward existential coming to completeness through encountering another person in a way that unites body, soul, and spirit. An integral component of sexuality is sexual orientation, that is, whether one is attracted to a partner of the same gender, or the opposite gender, or perhaps to both, and possibly to neither. Is this concept found in Scripture or in Islam? Classical Islamic theologians and jurists discuss sexuality, though in a way deeply prejudiced by male dominance, but they did not reflect systematically on what we call sexual orientation. Anyway, that's towards the beginning of his book, and it's a good book. You should find it on Amazon if you're interested, and it's extremely liberating. It's really striking as well. Like, I really appreciate his interpretations. It comes from a totally different place. While people at the mosque are, I'm referring to Orthodox Muslims who follow what I like to call pamphlet Islam, this very simplified black and white practice of Islam. These kinds of Muslims, when they talk about homosexuality, they are obsessed about anal sex between men. I'm sorry for my language, I don't know if that offends anybody, but that's what it's reduced to. And Scott Kugel takes it out of that context, and he says, no, these are human beings, and their sexual orientation has just as much right to be expressed as your heterosexual one does. And it's so liberating to read that from a practicing, knowledgeable Muslim. It's wonderful. He definitely comes from that place of liberating theology, where he takes that archetype of Moses, leading the Jews out of this oppressive regime of Pharaoh. So he touches on themes of diversity, touches on themes of equality and justice. Justice especially. I think justice would be the greatest one. And that's probably why he starts hypothesizing about same-sex marriage towards the end of his book, which is also really interesting. On same-sex marriage in Islam, I think Keisha Ali has a better approach to it, because she kind of talks about the realistic idea about it in terms of scholarship within Islam. Like, he takes it from a very idealistic way, focusing on the basics of marriage, and then Keisha Ali kind of takes it back and says, well, you know, in Islamic law you have this contract, and you have the meher, right, the dowry, and but at the same time she's coming at it from a different perspective. She's coming at it from a feminist perspective, so she is actually critiquing Islamic traditional marriage as well. So yeah, her book is also very interesting in that aspect. Anyway, that's all I have. I hope everybody had a wonderful Ramadan and Eid Mubarak, and inshallah I will make another video soon. Assalamu alaikum.